He thought it couldn't get any worse, that the worst pain had already passed, and that trust, once broken, could still be rebuilt. He was wrong. They didn't just destroy his marriage, they turned love into a laboratory experiment where emotions were replaced by genetics and marital fidelity by family decisions. His wife didn't leave him for another man. She followed a plan crafted in her mother's living room. Every detail had been calculated, from manipulation to the moment of conception. And him? He was expected to watch, silently, without a say. But even the most patient man has his limit. Greetings, my dear friend. I am very happy that you are watching my video, and I will be even happier if you subscribe to my channel. This will make me even happier. Let's get started. I was 26 at the time, and Sienna was a year older. We'd been together for 5 years, and married for 2. Our journey had started during our college days. She was studying to become an accountant, and I was working toward a mechanical engineering degree. We met for the first time at a party hosted by a friend we both knew. There was an immediate spark between us. After a few dates, we made it official. Less than a year later, we got married. Sienna had an older sister named Savannah, who was married to a man named Aiden. The two sisters were incredibly close, but the real challenge in our relationship wasn't her sister, or anyone else, really. It was Sienna's mother, Irene. She never tried to hide her disapproval of me. From day one, she seemed determined to find reasons to pull us apart. Her judgment was never veiled. She would often make comments like, "Sienna deserves someone better," or, "You're just not right for her," whenever the opportunity arose. Those remarks hurt. Bit by bit, they wore me down. Still, I felt fortunate. Sienna was everything I had ever dreamed of. Bright, poised, and breathtaking in ways I never thought possible. I had a secure position as an engineer, and we were laying the foundation for a comfortable life together. We had chosen to delay starting a family so we could travel, fully settle into our home, and tackle our mortgage. Sienna was completely on board and had even begun seriously considering a master's program. I offered to support her financially through it. My only wish was to see her feel empowered and fulfilled. But things started to shift about a year into our marriage. Irene took a bad fall and had to be hospitalized briefly. The doctors assured us it wasn't life-threatening, but she was instructed to rest at home for several days. Sienna, deeply shaken, stayed with her mother throughout the recovery. It was clear the experience had rattled her. I missed having Sienna around, but I tried to stay supportive. Not long after, Sienna's parents celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary, and that night, 2 revelations changed everything. First, Savannah spoke openly about her painful and prolonged struggle with infertility. Despite years of trying and consulting numerous specialists, she had never been able to conceive. Her voice quivered as she spoke, her eyes filling with tears. It was the kind of pain that made you feel utterly powerless. Then Irene took the floor and shared something of her own. She had always come across as emotionally distant, but that night her words cut straight to the heart. With visible emotion, she revealed her deep desire to become a grandmother. There was an urgency in her tone I hadn't heard before. "One fall could be the end for me," she said, her voice trembling. "All I want is to see Sienna have children before I go." When I looked at Sienna, her face was frozen in shock. Her complexion had gone pale, and her hand trembled slightly as she brought her wine glass to her lips. But it wasn't enough to ground her. Her mother's plea had clearly struck a nerve. We left the event and headed home, but Sienna was quiet, withdrawn, lost in her own mind. She barely said a word, clearly overwhelmed by everything she'd just heard. After giving her a little space, I eventually sat down beside her and gently asked, "Are you okay?" She turned to face me, her eyes glossy with tears. "I don't know, Adrian," she whispered. "I honestly don't know." "Is it about your mom?" I asked cautiously. She gave a small nod, her voice cracking under the weight of emotion. "She's not wrong," she said softly. "She's getting older, and Savannah, she's hurting so badly. I don't know what I should do." I pulled her close and held her tight. "We don't have to figure this out right now," I said gently. Whatever we decide, we'll get through it together. Even as I spoke those words, something inside me shifted. I could feel how deeply her mother's words had affected her, how they might have altered something fundamental. But I pushed those thoughts aside, reassuring myself that things would eventually return to normal. That was a mistake I wish I hadn't made. Weeks passed, then months. Nothing major seemed to change, until I received a phone call from Sienna that rattled me to the core. Her voice was trembling. "Adrian, I'm at the hospital," she said, struggling to speak. "It's Savannah. She tried to take her own life." I froze. My chest tightened and my mouth went dry. "Are you all right?" I asked quickly, barely thinking. "I'm okay," she replied, though her voice was fragile. "But Savannah's in critical condition. I really need you here." Without a second thought, I said, "I'm on my way," trying to keep my voice calm, even though panic was starting to set in. I drove straight to the hospital after work. When I arrived, I found Sienna in the waiting area. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen and red from crying. Irene was nearby, her expression unreadable, stoic, almost cold, yet somehow filled with blame. The air between us felt heavy, as if something unspoken was hanging just out of reach. When Irene's eyes met mine, they were unyielding, cold and piercing, stripped of any trace of empathy. It was as if, without speaking a word, she had already laid blame at my feet for what had happened to Savannah. I stepped toward Sienna, encircling her in a tight embrace, trying to offer her some shred of solace. But no matter how closely I held her, I couldn't escape the sting of Irene's silent condemnation. Aiden, Marco, and Irene's husband lingered nearby, visibly uncomfortable, but it was Irene's stark detachment that unsettled me most. The unspoken judgment hung heavy in the air. I couldn't shake the creeping feeling that I was being held accountable, though I didn't understand why. I leaned in close to Sienna, lowering my voice. "What happened?" I asked, my words soft, almost swallowed by the tension. Her answer came hesitantly, voice trembling. It's the infertility, Adrian." She went on to explain how Savannah had been suffering in silence for years, concealing the struggle from everyone. Their mother's latest remark, another not-so-subtle dig about wanting grandchildren, had pushed Savannah past her breaking point. It had all become too much to bear. The revelation settled in my chest like ice. I couldn't fully comprehend the weight Savannah had been carrying, but it was clear it had crushed her. 2 days later, Savannah was discharged from the hospital. Though physically she appeared to be recovering, her emotional state remained fragile. Doctors had begun her on antidepressants, hoping to soften the impact of everything she'd endured. That weekend, we all gathered at Irene's home for a tense family meeting. The atmosphere was thick with unease, stifled by a silence no one dared to break. We sat in the living room, skirts around the subject until, inevitably, the matter of children came up again. Everyone still bore the imprint of what had happened to Savannah, and Irene's pointed comments from the party hadn't faded from memory. I hesitated, knowing the delicate nature of what I was about to say. But I couldn't hold it in. "Have you and Aiden ever thought about adoption?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It might still give you the chance to be parents, just not biologically." I wasn't trying to diminish the value of bloodlines, only to offer a path forward. I believed that love didn't require shared DNA to flourish. But the moment the words left my mouth, the room seemed to turn to stone. Every gaze shifted toward me, heavy with disbelief. I could feel the resistance before anyone spoke. Then Irene shattered the silence. "Adoption?" she repeated, her voice sharp with disbelief. "That's not the same thing. That's not a real grandchild. Not our blood." Her words landed with brutal force. I fought to keep my composure, swallowing my instinctive reaction. I hadn't spoken out of ignorance. I knew how deeply family legacy mattered to them. But I also saw adoption as a chance for Savannah and Aiden to create something meaningful. Still, Irene dismissed it outright. After that, the discussion fell apart. No alternatives were offered. No one else dared to speak. The weight of unspoken resentment clung to all of us. Eventually, people began to leave, silently acknowledging that we'd reached an impasse. In the days that followed, Sienna grew quiet. She didn't say much, but I could feel the disappointment radiating off her. I shared it. Weeks went by, and subtle changes began to unfold. Savannah and Aiden started coming around more often. On the surface, it seemed like they were trying to reconnect. But something about their visits felt off. I would catch snippets of low conversations from the kitchen, muffled, cautious. Then, as soon as they entered the living room, the talking would stop. There was a strange, concealed energy between them. It gnawed at me. I couldn't tell what they were hiding, but I was certain it somehow involved me. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself Savannah just needed her sister's comfort. But then Sienna began to change as well. She grew secretive with her phone, quickly locking it when I walked into the room. She withdrew in small but unmistakable ways. The warmth that had once filled our relationship dimmed, leaving behind a growing emotional distance I didn't know how to cross. I couldn't identify what was driving the wedge between us, but it was becoming impossible to ignore. And then, on July 5th, everything came to a head. I came home from work and turned onto our street, only to see several unfamiliar cars lining the curb in front of our house. A sense of foreboding bloomed in my chest. When I stepped inside, the living room was crowded with family. My in-laws, Savannah, Aiden. Their faces were tense, expressions unreadable. Sienna rose from the couch, her tone clipped and emotionless. "Sit down. We need to talk." I scanned the room. Every pair of eyes was trained on me. My pulse quickened. "What's going on?" I asked. But before Sienna could respond, Irene stepped forward, cutting the air with her voice. "What's your solution, then?" she demanded. Her tone was ice cold. My brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" I asked, turning to Sienna, searching for some kind of explanation. Irene glanced at her daughter, then fixed her gaze squarely on me again. "Our grandchildren," she said flatly. "What are you going to do about them?" I was taken aback, confused and frustrated. I don't understand," I managed. Still trying to contribute something useful, I offered a thought that had been on my mind. "We could try IVF, maybe? It's not a sure thing, but it could work." But Irene recoiled as if I'd insulted her. Disgust twisted across her face. "No," she snapped. "Absolutely not." She whispered to herself, barely above a breath. Then, lifting her head, a cold resolve flickered in her gaze. "There is another way," she announced. My mind reeled. What could she possibly be about to propose? I looked toward Sienna, silently pleading for some reaction, but she avoided my eyes. Her attention was fixed first on Savannah, then flicked back to her mother. I turned back to Savannah. She was smiling. And beside her, Aiden lounged in his seat, smugness practically radiating from him. He reclined with exaggerated ease, wearing a look that made my stomach turn. The room was thick with tension. Even breathing felt like effort. I was completely in the dark, waiting, hoping for Sienna to say something. But she stayed still, her gaze rooted to the floor, face unreadable. Then suddenly, she exploded. "Say something, you idiot!" Her words lashed out, unexpected and sharp. I recoiled, stunned by the force behind them. Confused and shaken, I tried to make sense of it all. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Then Irene's voice cut through it, eerily composed, sending a chill through me. "As you're well aware, dear," she said, addressing Sienna, "Savannah has been cursed with barrenness. She'll never experience what it means to be a mother," she added, the cruelty in her tone impossible to miss. Sienna jumped in quickly, her words clipped and tense. "We've looked into alternatives," she said, her voice tight with something unsaid. "But surrogacy is far too risky." "There are hereditary issues," she continued, shaking her head as if already exhausted. "The consequences could echo through future generations." Aiden, never one to stay silent long, chimed in. Surrogacy is insanely expensive, and that's before you even get into the cost of raising a kid. Everything was spiraling, but I refused to be sidelined. Then what exactly are you proposing? I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay composed. That's when Irene delivered the blow. If you're unwilling to father a child, she said, then Sienna will carry Aiden's. Time froze. My thoughts disintegrated. Her words crashed over me, Sienna and Aiden. I looked at my wife, desperate for her to contradict what I'd just heard. But she wouldn't meet my eyes. She just stared at the ground, the silence between us louder than anything I'd ever heard. Sienna, carrying Aiden's child. I couldn't process it. I could barely breathe. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry as dust. I prayed this was some grotesque joke. But it wasn't. Irene continued, her voice cool and surgical, as though she were outlining a business plan. We know you won't want to be involved in the child's life, she said coldly. That's not going to be a problem. When the child is born, she explained, we'll legally list Savannah and Aiden as the parents. My entire body went numb. I sat frozen, desperately wishing this was some twisted hallucination. But it wasn't. And Irene hadn't finished. Children aren't meant to be engineered, she said with a sanctimonious tilt to her chin. They're not laboratory specimens. They should come from love, a natural union. Her implication hung in the air, each word more revolting than the last. She launched into a sermon, spewing dogma about divine law and the moral decay of artificial conception. She spoke of souls, sin, and her sacred duty to keep her future grandchild from eternal damnation. I couldn't take it anymore. Nausea twisted in my gut. Before she could continue, I shot to my feet. My fists were clenched and my voice roared through the room. Absolutely not. I wasn't the kind to yell, but this was beyond tolerance. They needed to hear me. Sienna, tell me. What do you have to say about this? I turned to her, my voice raw with disbelief and anguish. Her eyes finally lifted to meet mine, and they were full of fear and doubt. But she said nothing, not a single word. And that silence, that was the greatest betrayal of all. She didn't defend me. She wasn't on my side. Irene stared at me, momentarily startled by my outburst, but quickly regained her composure. She pushed forward, trying to legitimize her monstrous plan, as though reason could be found in madness. I wasn't listening anymore. That's when Aiden stepped toward me, reaching out like a concerned sibling. Don't you dare touch me, I growled, jerking away, my rage close to erupting. We understand your decision to forego fatherhood, Irene said, her voice coated in faux sympathy. But you're still young. You have needs. Aiden is prepared to take on that responsibility. I froze in place. What the hell did that even mean? I couldn't make sense of it. But she continued, tireless in her conviction. Savannah agrees. It has to be a child created from love, which means Sienna and Aiden must come together. Naturally. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The words struck me like a blow to the chest. Impossible to believe, too twisted to grasp. That's when I snapped. You've completely lost it, you bitter witch! I shouted, my voice hoarse with fury. The room went still. It was as though time itself had paused. Savannah sucked in a sharp breath. Sienna's face contorted in rage, but behind her eyes was something else. Was it guilt? Embarrassment? I couldn't tell. Aiden, who'd been silent up until then, tilted his head and smirked. Relax, he said with a mocking tone. You'll enjoy it. That was it. I was done. No thoughts, no hesitation. One moment I was upright, the next my fist crashed into Aiden's jaw. He hit the ground hard. Chaos exploded. Savannah let out a scream. Sienna joined her. Their cries rang in my ears, but adrenaline had taken full control. Get out of my house! I roared, my throat on fire. I didn't wait for a reaction. I turned, slammed the bedroom door shut, and locked it behind me. Their voices still pierced the walls. Not long after, I caught a glimpse of them through the window, leaving. But the quiet was short-lived. The door flung open and Sienna stormed in, cheeks flushed with rage, though I glimpsed something deeper. Hurt, maybe betrayal. I didn't care anymore. "You disrespected my mother!" she cried, her voice trembling. She brushed aside everything else, like the fact they'd tried to make me okay with her sleeping with Aiden, as though that wasn't a monstrous betrayal. That's what cut deepest. I couldn't hold back. "You're acting like they didn't just try to manipulate me into giving you my blessing to sleep with your brother-in-law," I shot back. My throat throbbed, but I pressed on. Sienna didn't respond. She just stared at me, trembling with rage, but silent. She kept her distance for the rest of the day. That night, I turned to Ethan, my closest friend, the one who kept me grounded. I vented to him for hours, poured everything out. He listened without judgment. "This is emotional warfare, Adrian," he said gently. "Your mother-in-law's orchestrating it all." I knew he was right. I felt it in every fiber of my being. Then Ethan suggested something that sounded crazy at first, but it slowly started to make sense. "Maybe it's time to go. Take Sienna and leave town. Get away from her family." I'd been struggling to find a way to stop the downward spiral. Maybe getting out was the only option. I wasn't sure I had the strength to walk away. But the idea of breaking free started to feel like the only way forward. Later that night, when I got home, Sienna was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes swollen, face streaked with tears. She looked shattered. The sight of her hit me hard. I felt a rush of guilt, but the words wouldn't come. "Sienna?" I said softly. She lifted her head, still crying. "My mom's in the hospital," she whispered, her voice thin and shaky. "They say it's critical." Before I could stop myself, I spat out something vicious. "Let her suffer. She's earned it." Ice cold. Merciless. I knew how monstrous it sounded the moment it left my mouth, but I couldn't hold it in any longer. The poison inside me had boiled over. Sienna broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood there, numb, watching. I hadn't wanted to be cruel, but after everything I'd endured, the dam had burst. "I didn't want to hurt you," I finally said, my voice low and tired. "But your mother has made it impossible for me to feel anything except revulsion." She wiped her face, then met my eyes. "You don't understand, Adrian," she murmured. "Savannah's falling apart. She's still not okay. I'm scared she might hurt herself." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't prepared to take on Savannah's fragile mental state. After a pause, I gave her the only thing I could think of. "We'll try. Soon. For a baby. Our baby, all right?" The words felt strange, like they didn't belong to me, but I said them anyway. I had no better answer. Sienna's face softened slightly. A faint smile broke through her sorrow. "Okay," she said quietly. "Soon." But even as she agreed, I knew it wasn't about starting a family. It was about keeping the uneasy truce with her family alive. And that left me uneasy. The next few days passed quietly, but something shifted in Sienna. She was warmer, more present. She held on to me longer. Her phone stayed in plain sight. Something had changed. She caught me off guard with a sudden, effortless smile, and for an instant I felt myself falling for her all over again. But beneath the surface, something felt off. I couldn't define it, just an elusive sense of wrongness that lingered. It unsettled me. Deep down, I knew better than to trust it. 6 months passed in a blur, and somehow my relationship with Sienna had intensified beyond anything I'd imagined. I couldn't identify the exact moment it shifted, but my feelings for her had grown unexpectedly deeper. I began saying yes to everything she wanted. A new flat screen? I bought it on the spot. A spa retreat? I booked it that same day. I wasn't entirely sure what drove me. Maybe I was still carrying guilt. Maybe I was trying to repair the damage I'd caused in the past. Whatever the reason, I poured myself into making Sienna happy. Irene, My mother-in-law stopped pestering us about starting a family, and even Savannah seemed to be doing better emotionally. Those developments caught me off guard. I didn't know whether it was because people had finally stopped pushing the baby topic or if time had just dulled the tension. But for the first time in a while, I felt like I could breathe. I wanted to keep that peace alive, so I put together a surprise for Sienna, something I'd been secretly setting money aside for. It was meant to be a gesture of renewal, a clean slate. On February 20th, with tickets in hand and hope in my chest, I stepped into our house, ready to show her how much she meant to me. But the house felt strangely quiet. At first, I assumed she'd just gone out, maybe to pick something up. But as I made my way upstairs, a strange heaviness seemed to settle around me. When I reached the bedroom, I noticed a neatly folded note resting on the bed. My stomach tightened as I recognized her handwriting. Adrian, things between us never truly changed. I love you. More than ever, I believe you feel that too. My mother has warmed up to you in her own way. But Savannah still seems burdened with sadness, and I know our inability to give her a grandchild weighs heavily on her. I didn't bring this up before because I knew in time you'd understand. You've grown, you've matured, and your love for me is undeniable. That's why my parents, Savannah and Aiden, are supporting us in moving forward with the decision we made 6 months ago. We're leaving today. I'm going to get pregnant with Aiden. I won't tell you where we're going because I know you too well. I need calm, and so does Aiden. Savannah says he gets anxious, and that could complicate things if conception takes time. We'll be gone for a month. Don't look for us. I'll come back when I'm expecting. Nothing has changed between us. We'll pick up where we left off. No one else in the family knows, and it has to stay that way. This is just between us. I stood there frozen, the words repeating in my mind like an echo in a hollow room. A wave of grief and shame crashed over me. There's no point in denying it. It wounded me more deeply than anything ever had. But in that numb, shocked silence, I finally acknowledged a truth I had been too afraid to face. There was never any true trust between us. No real partnership, just a relationship steered by her mother's obsession with continuing the bloodline. The anger didn't explode. It crept in slowly, layered beneath a heavier, more suffocating feeling, disappointment in myself. I had allowed Sienna to mold me into something malleable. Irene had been the architect behind it all. And I, blind, naive, had convinced myself that her love was genuine. Eventually, the heartbreak calcified into something colder, indifference. 2 days later, clarity struck me like a bolt. It had all been meticulously planned. Sienna and Irene had created a seamless illusion, casting me as the loyal, spineless husband who would swallow any betrayal, no matter how twisted. I loathed that version of myself. I couldn't keep playing that role. I had to reclaim some part of myself. Fueled by adrenaline and unanswered questions, I drove straight to her parents' house. I wasn't sure what I would say. I only knew I needed to confront them. But the driveway was vacant. No cars, no signs of life. The letter had told the truth. They were already gone. My humiliation deepened. Every detail had been executed with surgical precision. They hadn't left a single loose thread. The depth of the betrayal made me nauseous. Crushed, I drove home, my thoughts circling in shame and disbelief. That's when I called Ethan. He picked up after a few rings, his voice laced with concern. "Hey man, you all right? What happened?" I faltered, then spoke. "No, I'm not okay. Sienna's gone. They just left, like we were never anything." I swallowed hard, the words burning. "She's going to have a baby, with Aiden." I couldn't say anything more. What was left to say? Ethan let out a long, stunned breath. "Jesus, that's unreal. That's betrayal on a whole different level. What are you going to do?" But I had nothing. I was hollow. "I don't know, Ethan," I murmured. "I really don't." To be honest, I didn't have a clue anymore. We were just sitting there with a few beers between us, the silence hanging thick as the weight of it all slowly settled over us like a storm cloud. After a couple more rounds, he turned to me and asked again, "No joke, man. What now? What are you planning to do?" I didn't even look up. My gaze stayed fixed on the table, fingers clenched around a bottle that had long lost its chill. "Nothing," I said under my breath. "I'm done. I'm not chasing after her. I just want this nightmare to end." That night I tried calling Sienna, but after searching around for her phone, it hit me. She'd left it behind, purposefully. Another calculated move to shut me out, to make sure I couldn't reach her, couldn't ask questions she didn't want to answer. I picked up the phone and went through her messages. At a glance, everything seemed normal. Small talk with family, updates about her mom. But the more I looked, the more it felt rehearsed, like she was putting on a show, not living a life. That weekend, I spiraled. I didn't move from the couch. The anger just boiled inside me, stronger by the hour. The lies, the betrayal, it all kept churning until I could barely breathe. My hatred for her and everyone close to her turned into something ugly and absolute. I couldn't imagine ever facing them again. It was unreal. Sienna, my wife, had been having an affair with Aiden, her brother-in-law, for months. They tried to pass it off as a nervous mistake, something about fertility stress, but it was nothing but a smokescreen. They were in it together, and I'd finally had enough. I needed to disappear, leave all their madness behind. So I did. I bought a one-way ticket to Canada. I packed the essentials, sold the car, and left the rest. The lease on the place was good for another half-year. I pawned our electronics, drained the joint accounts and mine. Every last dollar. She wasn't seeing a penny. I canceled the credit cards. I removed her name from everything: insurance, legal documents, anything she was tied to. I had about 3 months' worth of savings. Just in case, I asked Ethan for a bit more. No hesitation from him. "Whatever you need. Just don't disappear on me," he said. He was the only one I trusted. I took her phone with me, too. Before leaving, I walked away from my job and made it crystal clear. I didn't want to hear from her again. From anyone. What she did couldn't be undone. 3 weeks into life in Canada, her phone buzzed. A WhatsApp notification from a family group named Baby. I paused, but curiosity cracked me open. I clicked it. It was from Savannah. "It's finally happened, everyone. After more than 20 attempts, we're having a baby." I tapped the attached photo. Aiden, grinning like a fool, standing beside Sienna, who was lying on a bed in nothing but her underwear. The implication was unmistakable. The next photo showed a positive pregnancy test. Sienna was pregnant, with his child. My chest caved in. I couldn't believe it. The rage, sorrow, humiliation, they slammed into me all at once. But I was a continent away now. There was no going back. That door had closed. More messages followed, Savannah shouting, "Congratulations," Aiden boasting, "We did it," and Sienna, right there in the middle, reveling in the life that used to be mine. I tried to bury it, forced myself to focus on finding work. I took whatever I could, warehouse labor at a small manufacturer. With my engineering background and fluency in several languages, I could have aimed higher, but I just needed something to drown out the noise. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept my mind from drifting into the poison I left behind. A week in, I woke up on a quiet Sunday to a message from Sienna. "Love, I'm back. Everything's okay, and I'm pregnant. Come home soon. We need to talk." I stared at it, speechless. After everything, she still thought I'd come running? I didn't respond. I spent that day wandering the streets of Toronto, needing to get far from her and everything she represented. But her messages kept coming. "Come home, love. Let's talk." Then, "The accounts are empty. The cards won't work. I need grocery money." I left them unread. Let Aiden and that toxic family take care of her now. They were perfect for each other. I kept walking, hoping for some sort of clarity, but her presence clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. Then the calls started. Her name flashed on the screen, then Savannah's, then Aiden's. I ignored every one. Still, they didn't let up. The phone kept lighting up, Missed calls, texts, voicemails. They were relentless. Sienna, Savannah, Aiden, pleading, demanding. But I had nothing left. Nothing to say. Nothing to give. Then my father called. I hadn't seen that coming. Hearing his voice caught me completely off guard. "Adrian," he said. His voice was tight with concern. "We need to talk. Your mother's seriously worried. What's happening with you? Why are you shutting Sienna out?" I couldn't bring myself to answer right away. We hadn't exchanged a word in weeks. "Dad, please don't get involved. I'm done. I can't keep pretending. I'm finished with them." He hesitated. "Adrian, this is your family. Don't do something you'll regret. You should come back." Back to that place? The thought made my chest burn. That wasn't home anymore, not after everything. "Still," he pressed on, trying to stay calm and rational. "Just think it through. Your mom wants to help make things right." Make things right? There was nothing left to fix. Sienna had made her bed, and so had I. I ended the call. His voice echoed in my mind, but I saw it for what it was. Another attempt to draw me back in. I hadn't spoken to anyone in that house in days, and I hadn't expected him to call. But 2 days later he did. That time, I told him everything. I laid it all bare, from Sienna's betrayal to the final message she left. I even sent him screenshots of our WhatsApp chat. At first, he was stunned. "Hold on, are you saying she was with Aiden? Your sister's husband?" He sounded like he couldn't process it. "That's exactly what I'm saying," I replied, emotionless. "She's pregnant, and it's his." There was a long, weighty silence. "I can't believe it. That woman, Adrian, don't give in. You're better off without her. I'm with you all the way. To hell with your mother-in-law, and to hell with Sienna." "I've got you," he said firmly. "If they try anything again, I'll handle it." "I know," I told him. "I'm not going back." I promised I'd bring him to Canada when I could, and asked him to block Sienna's number. I didn't want a single thread connecting me to her or her family. For the next 15 days, I turned my phone off completely. I needed the silence. I didn't want to hear from Sienna, or her relatives, or anyone. Once I was settled in Canada, I bought a new phone and locked down every account I had. I didn't remove Sienna or her family from social media. I just made myself invisible. I didn't need their words lingering in my inbox like ghosts. Then, out of nowhere, Ethan, my closest friend, sent me a message. Sienna had shown up at his door. "She came here," he told me, "looking for answers, asking where you were. I told her she should have thought about that before sleeping with her brother-in-law. Then I told her to leave or I'd call the police." That gave me a strange sense of comfort. Ethan had defended me. He said she looked unhinged, frantic. I wasn't shocked. She had made her decisions. Now she was dealing with the fallout. 2 weeks later, I finally powered my phone back on. My stomach dropped. More than 100 missed calls and messages. Most were from Sienna. She was pleading in her texts. "Adrian, please, I still love you." None of it meant anything. "I want you to have your first child. This is for my sister. Don't ignore me. Please, I love you." She'd left voice notes too, shaky, full of desperation. But I felt nothing. I had moved on. Then came the messages from her mother, angry and relentless. She called me selfish, accused me of abandoning my responsibilities, claimed Sienna was wasting away under the stress, even hospitalized for a breakdown. I didn't think twice. I blocked her number. I didn't respond to anyone. And in that growing silence, I started to heal. Eventually, my father joined me in Canada. His presence brought me peace. He adapted quickly, settled into the new life. I landed a better job, steady work with decent pay. For the first time in ages, things felt right. And then it happened. I was granted permanent residency, a fresh chapter, a life I rebuilt from nothing. With the help of a good attorney, I pushed forward. I filed the divorce papers. And soon enough, Sienna was formally served. As part of the legal separation process, we presented a handwritten letter she had penned herself, in which she plainly admitted to walking away from the marriage by her own choice. He also submitted WhatsApp chat screenshots to reinforce the claims. My lawyer argued not just for a divorce, but for a complete annulment. Sienna, meanwhile, kept flooding my phone with messages. Pointless chatter, relentless and empty. Months later, I was hit with crushing news. Sienna had lost the baby due to a miscarriage. Irene wasted no time assigning blame, insisting that my departure had thrown Sienna into a downward emotional spiral. At the same time, Sienna had turned her back on her own relatives, accusing them of pressuring her into conceiving a child with Aiden. It was clear she was grasping at anyone or anything to deflect the responsibility, but I saw right through her attempts. Despite it all, she didn't stop trying to reach out to me. She kept looking for a way back in, somehow convinced that I might return. But I had no plans to be misled again. One day, out of nowhere, she initiated a video call. I still don't know what made me answer. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I just wanted to see if any part of the woman I once loved was still there. But when her face appeared, I barely recognized her. Life had etched harsh lines into her features, marks not of time, but of sorrow and consequence. She looked worn by regret, aged not by years, but by everything she had endured. She opened her mouth to apologize as soon as the call began, but I wouldn't give her the chance. I kept my camera off, refusing her even a glimpse of my face, refusing her the illusion of a second chance. I made it clear. This would be brief. Your choices speak louder than any words, I told her. You made a decision that changed everything, knowing full well I stood against it. You mistook my love for obedience, and that's something I'll never forgive. Maybe in another version of our story, we'd be preparing for a child now. But patience was never one of your virtues. And as for Irene, she's still around. Unfortunately, I don't see her going anywhere soon. I didn't soften my words. When she finally dies, I hope her end is filled with suffering. And I promise you, I'll stand over her grave just to spit on it. You and that venomous woman ruined my marriage. That stain will cling to you for the rest of your life. I paused, letting the silence settle thick between us. I've moved on. I'm with someone new now. You'll linger in my memory, I said, but I'll never extend you forgiveness. I pray your mother never lives long enough to meet a grandchild. Choices come with consequences. I've faced mine. Now, it's your turn. I could hear her crying on the line, but I felt nothing. My emotions were long gone. Then she told me something I didn't see coming. During her surgery, doctors had removed her uterus. She'd never be able to carry a child again. I hadn't hoped for that, hadn't wished it upon her, but still, that was her cross to bear, not mine. Without another word, I ended the call. That was the last time I ever heard her speak. That was February 2019. Since then, I've been in Montreal, putting my life back together, trying to mend what was broken by everything she left behind. The road's been rough, but it was one I had no choice but to travel. The divorce wrapped up smoothly. We had little to split, and I was ordered to pay alimony for only a year. Then 2020 arrived, the year the world seemed to freeze. Time lost its rhythm, days bled into each other, and the whole world felt unreal. But to be honest, none of that truly matters now. It all feels like fiction, like something torn from a tragic novel. And yet, it was real. I just wish it hadn't been. Our story comes to an end here. Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for taking the time to watch. If you enjoyed this story, please check out other videos on this channel. See you soon, my dear friend.